Hey there. Greetings, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here today to do Commonalities Compared. Yep, this is the show that we do every week in which Ben, a subscriber friend of mine, picks two commonalities in rock. Could be two bass players, could be two guitar players, could be two albums or two bands or two producers. The point is that it's something that it's a two and they have something in common. So today he's picked two vocalists, and these two vocalists have both sang in one band, Genesis. So Peter Gabriel, the original vocalist for Genesis, till about midway into the 1970s, and was replaced by the drummer of the band, Phil Collins, who took over and stayed with the band till I believe the mid-90s or mid to late 90s, and then was replaced by Ray Wilson, who only did the one album. So anyways, I like both of these artists very much. The funny part about these guys is that I came to them the opposite way. So Phil Collins was for me, was the first one that I listened to with Trick of the Tail. So the two songs that got me into them were actually Turn It On Again and Misunderstanding, which was released on their Duke album in 1980. And then when I went back to buy a Genesis album, my friend and me went to the store to buy one, and he got Trick of the Tail and I got Wind in the Wuthering. And then he taped Trick of the Tail for me, and I taped Wind in the Wuthering for him. But so my first couple of albums by Genesis that I owned were both Phil Collins on the vocals. So I got used to that. And then later I developed an interest in Peter Gabriel's music and decided I would go back and check out Peter Gabriel as a member of Genesis, because I had no idea that he was until I had bought a couple albums, and somebody said, "So that guy used to sing for Genesis." I said, "What? No, Phil Collins sings for Genesis." And he said, "No, Peter Gabriel was the original singer." So I went back and I bought the four, I think there was four of them: Trespass, Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, and Selling Them by the Pound. Those are the four that I bought. But I never listened to any of them until my daughter was born, which is kind of strange, right? So the first one, I kind of did them in the order they came out, and Trespass was the first one. So that's the one I did first. And then I moved on up. And so for a long time, I thought of them as being two completely different musicians, vocalists, playing, him in his solo stuff and Genesis, and Peter Gabriel in his own solo stuff. So that's where my comparisons were for them initially. So when I did the Genesis part, which was much later, I'm going to kind of break this into two. So you're going to have a little bit of a comparison to their solo stuff, because that's where I got into them. And then I will give the kind of a little bit of a talk about the two of them as members of Genesis. So first of all, I liked Phil Collins' voice quite a bit. It's a more of a mainstream type sounding voice. He is really good at singing catchy songs. He has the kind of voice that I think is almost perfect for the Genesis of that era. And his solo stuff, again, he's a very love writing songs. His songs are very kind of love artist type singing. So I kind of think of him as that, not so much as a progressive singer, although he did do Trick of the Tail and Wind of the Wuthering. I did like his vocals on both of them. They are much more, for me, a lot more easy to imitate than the Peter Gabriel stuff. So for me, Peter Gabriel, who I came to with Security and Gabriel 3, and then So, those were the big first three that I kind of followed with him on it. To me, his voice is also very smooth, like Phil Collins. They both have a kind of a smooth sound to it, but his voice has much more inflection in it. And I think a lot of that is because the lyrics are much more complicated with Peter Gabriel than they are with Phil Collins. And therefore you get a lot more of an emotional feel from Gabriel's voice than you do from Phil Collins. Now, I know there will be people out there that will argue with me about this. I cannot see things from other people's points of view. I can only see them from my own experiences. So my experience is that Gabriel has a much kind of inflection to his vocals, a lot more emotion to his vocals, and the lyrics are much more complicated and intricate and create a more atmospheric feel for me. So that's my kind of feel on them as individuals. As members of Genesis, which I don't have Genesis albums here, but I find that Peter Gabriel's stuff much more complex, maybe very busy actually in a lot of ways, and a lot more difficult to follow because of that, because of the busyness and because of the complexity of the music and the lyrics. Whereas Phil Collins is much more straightforward, much easier to understand, probably a lot easier to follow and listen to. But I do like both of them quite a bit. I probably over time, if had to choose, I still would probably prefer Phil Collins with Genesis voice over Peter Gabriel's, only because of my entry point with Wind and the Wuthering and Trick of the Tail. Whereas with the other albums, I've grown to like those albums a lot more than I used to. Trespass, Nursery Crime, Selling England by the Pound, Foxtrot, and even The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is not one of my favorite Genesis albums, so I'm going to take some hits for that as well. But I never really quite warmed up to the... I do love the vocals a lot with those albums, don't get me wrong. I just think the Phil Collins era for me was a little bit more understandable, I guess. But as time goes on, they've come this way to the point where they're almost equal. So to me, I love them both. I love them both for different reasons. I love the Peter Gabriel solo stuff much more than Phil Collins' solo stuff. But maybe I give Phil Collins a little bit of the edge with the Genesis only because of my history. But both excellent singers, very good frontmen. I think Peter Gabriel has more of a flair for the dramatic and for drama. He has more of a what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. More of a creative attitude towards music. Music for him is kind of secondary to his creative abilities as far as putting videos and stuff together. And you've seen this with the MTV stuff that he's done, and his ability to promote something different on stage rather than just progressive rock when he came out with those different costumes with Genesis. So I think in that area, he's much more creative, and his lyrics are much better in many ways. Maybe a little too busy, but much better in a lot of ways. And ability to tell stories is, I think, greater. Where Phil Collins is commercially much greater. He's done much greater stuff commercially than Peter Gabriel has, because he can reach those mainstream masses much better. His vocal sounds, his ability to stretch further over into that kind of music and that kind of African feel to some of his songs, and that kind of dance feel, the pop feel to everything that he does as well. And you don't get that as much with Peter Gabriel, although he has become a little bit more mainstream over the last dozen years or so, especially with this more recent album, although his vocals still sound fantastic on this new album. So overall, I think there's not a lot separating the two. I personally prefer Peter Gabriel overall for a lot of reasons that I've already stated. But I do like Phil Collins a lot. He's definitely a top singing vocalist for me too as well. And a superior drummer to a lot of drummers out there. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Commonality Compared, featuring Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, former singers for Genesis. So take care and have a good day and a good evening. We'll see you later. Goodbye. Oh, forgot, don't hit the like and subscribe and the notification bell. Any comments you want to make, put those in the comment section below. We will see you next episode of Commonalities Compared next Sunday. Take care and goodbye.